Hello, I'm Rabbi Ariel Rackovsky, and welcome to another edition of Tefilah Tuesdays. After we finish Birkos HaShachar, there is a section that is called Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, accepting the yoke of heaven upon ourselves. It's the section of the Siddur that begins Le'olam Yehei Adam Yirei Shamayim B'Seiser Uvegalui. A person should always fear God, both in private and in public in a revealed way. It's a little bit of a strange formulation that we have to describe the ways that a person should be a Yirei Shamayim. Some historical background to this prayer might be in order. It's also interesting because oftentimes in the rush to begin davening, this section of the davening, this and the korbanos that follow it, the readings of the sacrifices, tend to often be skipped over and in the interest of time. So it's interesting to note just the historical background behind this tefillah and what it really is coming to tell us. There are those scholars that believe that this tefillah was written in the year, around the time of the year 456 of the Common Era. In the Koren Saks Siddur, they describe that this was written during the time of a Persian king named Yazdegerd, who made a number of decrees against the Jewish people, against Jewish observance, specifically observing Shabbat and reading the Torah in public. And the language of this prayer is designed both to commemorate the prayers that weren't allowed and to address their circumstances. So, Olam Yehei Adam Yirei Shamayim B'Seiter Uvegalui V'Dover Emes Bilvavo, and speaking truth in your heart. That refers to the reality that people were forced to practice their Judaism in secret rather than in public. And so the prayer is expressing the wish that we should be able to practice our Yiras Shamayim, our fear of God, in both a public way and in a private way. When this whole section concludes with the bracha of Mekadesh as Shemo Barabim, that God sanctifies His name in public, and that addresses the very real concern and the very real circumstances of martyrdom, which, as we know, is known as Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying the name of God. That when people submitted to death rather than renouncing their fate, that is the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is sanctified in public, even as His observance of His commandments often was forced to be done in private. So this prayer of Le'olam Yehei Adam Yirei Shamayim B'Seiser Uvegalui, as it continues through Kadesh Shimcha Makdishei Shemecha, the Kadesh Shimcha B'Olamecha, sanctify your name through those who sanctify you and in your world, Uv'Yeshuascha Tarum V'Sagbiak Harnenu, and may your glory be raised through your salvation. Those are expressing expressing the reality of the situation in which observance had to be done in private, but it is also expressing the notion that we should not be forced to sanctify God's name through giving up our own lives, but rather that we should sanctify God's name through the way we live our lives. It is far more important to live a life that is Al Kiddush Hashem than to be willing to die Al Kiddush Hashem. I think there is another lesson here, though. In addition to that lesson, that Kiddush Hashem, that sanctifying God's name is done best when it is done in the context of our regular lives, and not through those heroic actions that people should hopefully never be forced to submit to. There's another lesson here. Olam Yehei Adam Yirei Shamayim B'Seiser Uvegalui. B'Seiser Uvegalui means in private and in public. Chazal tell us that anything that is prohibited to be done in public is also prohibited to be done in private. Because Chazal are not interested, the Torah is not interested, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not interested in hypocrites. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be fearful of God in public and in private. Not just to put on a veneer of observance, not just to put on a show of a connection to the community, not just to put on airs of Torah study, that people should think that we are involved in all those things, but that we should actually be involved in all those things. What goes on in private is just as and in more important than the image that we try and project to others in public. Oftentimes we try and put on this kind of face. We try and show that we are a certain way, and the way we live in private does not match up to the way we want others to perceive us when we are in public. Kadesh Shimcha Makdishei Shemecha, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to sanctify His name, V'seiser u'v'galui. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to sanctify His name when we are in private, when no one is around, when our character is really tested. How are we going to behave if nobody knows how we behave? That is truly the test of character. That is truly the test of whether we are able to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, we are able to sanctify the name of God. When we act the same way in private as we do in public, when our private persona and our public persona match, that is really a test of character and integrity and strength and value. I'll see you next time.